Welcome back, Wolfpack. Brillis here, and don't mess with Shuckle. Wait, I was supposed to say what? Really? Whatever. Looking at Shuckle's stats, I could talk about Shuckle's stats almost all day with how cool they are. That we have, there's so many things that can define a tank. You know, you just have really high base stats across the board, like good hit points and good defensive stats. You can also be a Pokemon like Chansey or Blissey, where you just have absurd, unfathomable amounts of hit points, and then something super low like a defense, even though special defense is still an incredible stat for it. And then you have Shuckle. Shuckle, it doesn't really have anything going for it on the hit points. 20 base hit points. Like, that's nothing. But then at the same time, you have some of the highest defenses in the game at 234 defense and special defense. So you get this weird effective tankiness that's also like a mirror of the other tank Pokemon. That's not in between, it's just one extreme of just being an incredible tanky Pokemon off of pure defenses and nothing else. And that's just a really cool thing to look at. Its typing is also Bug Rock. You only have 3 weaknesses, and I feel like it's a fair trade and not the most common weaknesses. They have Rock, Steel, and Water. Now, these do get a decent amount of play, but it's not something that's going to completely ruin your day if you encounter it. And I only have a normal and poison resistance, so you could have maybe gotten better resistances, but overall, like, Shuckle is just really good to go as a tanky Pokemon. Hopping into Pokemon Showdown, we can just kind of see the main set is going to be Chesto Berry with Contrary, and then just Rest. That the idea is you want to get as many defense boosts as possible by using Shell Smash. Normally Shell Smash lowers defense and special defense by 1. But with Contrary, it's going to raise those, and then it's also going to drop your attack and special attack and speed. That doesn't really matter when you're dealing with 10, 10, and 5 on the base stats. So Contrary is just going to be free defense boost, and you already have a stupid amount of defenses, so you're really just going to get really tanky. Like, once you break it down, after you use it twice, you're going to be over 1,000 in both defenses with this setup, and then that means you just Toxic Infestation your opponent. They can't switch out, they're also going to get burned down, and if they aren't immune to Toxic in any way, then they just lose in a couple of turns. You rest, you get that Chesto Berry the first time, and then you can just kind of rest and take less damage than they are. You know, set up an Infestation, set up a Toxic, then you can rest, and when you wake up, you're most likely going to have more health than they do, just from all that burn that they're taking from the Toxic and Infestation. Now, the nature I was thinking on this was Calm Nature. Pretty much we're just fully investing into one, and then putting the nature into the other. If you wanted to do it the other way around, all we really have to do is just go, well, not Bashful, Bold Nature. Go Bold Nature, and then 252, and it's the same thing. So whichever nature you can get your hand on, you can save yourself a lot of work. You can also, like, reduce speed. You can even reduce special attack, because that 1 extra point of damage and infestation really isn't going to change too much. So Shuckle's a very easy Pokemon to get natures for if you don't have it, and then you just kind of play Chesto Resto, and it's pretty strong from there. Now, looking at some other things that Shuckle can do, we have Leftovers with Encore, Sticky Web, so pretty much you're trying to be, with this set, a really weird setup Pokemon, that what you want to do is, if you can predict that they're doing setup, you throw out an Encore, and then that means they're going to be locked in the Encore. They use setup, so you didn't take any damage, and then they're going to have to switch out, which means you get a free Sticky Web or Stealth Rock. Shuckle is one of the few Sticky Web Pokemon, so it is good to use it for Sticky Web. It's also good for Stealth Rock because it's such a tanky Pokemon, and then, you know, you have the Sturdy ability. So no matter what you see, if you see some of the hardest hitting Pokemon in the game hitting you with a super effective attack, Sturdy is going to mean you're guaranteed to survive it, and that's also if the Pokemon isn't just a 3 or 4 hit KO anyways. What else you can do is, it takes a lot of mind games to use this set with Infestation at its highest level, but what you want to do is, like, if you Encore Pokemon they switched out, and they try to bring in a Pokemon that's going to be setting up, because, you know, when you look at Shuckle, it takes a lot of raw damage. That someone's going to want to Swords Dance against you, someone's going to want to Calm Mind, someone's going to want to Dragon Dance you. And if you can force out a Pokemon, and then Infestation them, they're stuck in there. Now, if they don't expect the Encore, so you're going to also have to go up against an unsuspecting player that hasn't seen this guide or doesn't know Shuckle has Encore, but if you are under those circumstances, that means they're going to be Encored in something like a Dragon Dance. They're going to be Encored into their status, and they can't switch out because of Infestation. So it's going to take a lot of prediction that, you know, if they switch into your Infestation, you might be able to sneak off an Encore. However, if you don't want to play the mind games, you feel there's a more anticipation of that Encore, you can just go with Knockoff. That Knockoff is a very just reliable move that you set up your Sticky Web, they're Encore, they're whatever. You throw out the Knockoff, and then you're still doing damage while also being absurdly tanky. I'd recommend pretty much the same set, that if you're split on the defenses and you have the hit points, you're getting the most effective health possible, and you're pretty much ready for anything. And then we have doubles. So for doubles, there's a pretty cool gimmick that I like bringing out that's really strong, that you have Moody and Acupressure. Acupressure is going to raise the random stat by 2, and then Moody does the same thing at the end of the turn, except it also lowers the stat by 1. So looking at a gain of +4, and then -1. So like +3 stats, and they could be all over the place. You can get evasion, you can get defenses. If you get that on Shuckle, that's going to be very powerful. So the idea here is, you know, Smeargle first turn is going to entrain Moody onto Shuckle. Shuckle can also acupressure itself, and then Smeargle can acupressure. So now we're looking at a gain of +5 in the end after the -1 drop, and if all those are going in your favor, you're getting really tanky really quick. Now again, you know, you could get messed up by that, you could lose defense from your Moody in the end. Then you're still dealing with Rest, Toxic Infestation, and I like throwing on the Bright Powder because it just adds to the randomness and it makes it a little more fun. That accuracy is already turned to 0.9 times, you get some evasion on top of that. Your opponent's going to have a very hard time hitting you or just burning them down with Toxic Infestation, so it's just something really cool. Also, Smeargle has Heal Pulse, so if you don't want Shuckle to rest and Smeargle is still looking healthy, you can throw out the Heal Pulse as well, but mostly you just want to make sure that entrainment goes off and acupressure until the opponent goes, okay, tired of the Smeargle, or it's a Smeargle anyway, might as well be focusing it. And lastly, now we also have these stat swap moves. The stat swap moves on Shuckle, I don't feel are very powerful. That's why I put them at the end of the video. It's not really worth too much of a mention unless you're super specializing in them with some very niche strategy. That Power Trick. Power Trick sounds insane. Switches the user's attack and defense stats. Well, now you have a 230 attack Pokemon. That's gotta be crazy. Except you're also a 10 defense, 20 hit point Pokemon. That pretty much anything is going to knock you out. There's no surviving that. The stats are far too low for you to survive anything, and since you are a very slow Pokemon, you're most likely going to get outsped and just breathed on and knocked out. Now you can put it in a Trick Room team, then that has its own things. That you have to be playing the Trick Room Shuckle just right, and even then you're using that turn on Power Trick, so you go first because you're under Trick Room, you use Power Trick, and then your opponent blows you up. So you're really not going to find too many opportunities for Power Trick to work. Power Split averages the attack and special attack with the target. Well, that means now you're just dropping your opponent's attack and special attack really low. But again, you're using a turn to set this up. You're still going to take damage. You're still going to have your opponent potentially set up on you. And if they don't like it that much, they're really disgruntled, they can just switch out and those effects go away. Now you do gain offenses, but Shuckle doesn't want to use those offenses. It's not going to be like, hey, I just averaged out with a Garchomp. Now I'm at like 90 base attack or something. I think it'd be a little higher than that, but still, it's not ridiculous kind of stats that you're gaining from it, and they can be phased out by your opponent, that your opponent just switches and it's done. And then Guard Split. Now, Guard Split is the one that I feel can work in doubles. Averages defense and special defense, Blissey. Chansey. I would say Chansey more because that Eviolite is super strong. So now you're going to give Chansey more defense, more special defense, and then it's going to be under that huge amount of hit points. That's where it kind of comes in. Now also, it isn't just like Chansey and Blissey that Guard Split works really well with. It's a lot of other Pokemon that like need that little extra defense boost that already have a lot of hit point bulk. Like Quagsire. Quagsire, he won't care. He'll get that Guard Split and then he'll be unaware and then it gets really good from there. But the Power Trick and Power, just don't do the power things. Those are really messy to work with, but Guard Split does have some potential if you're trying to go for a super tanky setup and you just want to really patch in the few defensive weaknesses that a Pokemon might have. So if you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you all have a nice day.